This video is sponsored by BookTube because our camera is really the only person around that we can talk to about books. Hello my lovely friends, it's Margaret. Today we are going to be talking about the top 10 books that I've read because of BookTube. This is part of Steve over at the Gnome's 10 for 12 series. This month, since we have Book Expo and BookCon coming up real soon, Steve thought it would be really fun to sit down and talk about our 10 favorite books that we have discovered or read because of BookTube. I will have his channel linked down in my description box if you want to check him out. He likes to talk about pop culture stuff like books, movies, comics, and Funkos. Lots and lots of Funkos. So I've been on BookTube since October 3rd of 2017, and I have read in that time 191 books in the last 2.5 years-ish, I guess is what it would be. That's a lot of books, guys. It was a very difficult process going, what 10 books do I want to bring to you guys? What 10 books do I think you should read? And I cannot wait to talk to you about them. They are in no particular order except for the first one, which is my favorite book that I have discovered because of BookTube, and that is Six of Crows by Leigh Bardugo. Oh my gosh. This is one of my first purchases after I got the BookTube bug. This was bought in October. I know that because it was bought right around the time that John Green's new book had come out, and I was looking for a specific like signature thing. So I was checking everywhere that I knew there would be a signed book to see if I could get any like extra, like not just John's signature but something else. The problem is I had watched like 3 straight hours of Jesse the Reader's channel. He was one of the first people I subscribed to. I love watching his videos, and so I'd watched like 3 straight hours of his backlog, and then I went to Target and I went to the book aisle. Don't go to Target after watching BookTube videos. Just stay away from the book aisle because they didn't have the book I wanted, but I still had money for a book, so I bought 2. And this was obviously one of them. This is a heist story. It's 6 friends that are trying to pull off an impossible heist in the most impenetrable fortress known in their world. Like, it's basically the Fort Knox of their world. Nobody gets in or out unless they're supposed to be going in or out. It's got multiple points of view, and you care about every single point of view in this book. You're sitting there learning things about the world. You don't have to read the Shadow and Bone trilogy to read this. Like, there are things that you will get and cameos that will be more important to you should you have read that series first, but you don't have to. If that's like if you've tried or you're not interested in it, you can just pick this up because this is like, Shadow and Bone was good, but this is great. Okay, like, this is a masterpiece. I loved it. It has such variety and diversity in its characters. It has such a fascinating world that she has built. It's such a good book. It has such great characters. You will love, maybe not every single one of them, but a lot of them. So that was my favorite book. Now we're just gonna get into the other 9, all of which I have loved, I adored. They just brought me so much joy. The next one we're gonna talk about is The Cruel Prince by Holly Black. I did not think I was gonna love this series as much as I did. I actually was not going to read it. I heard the premise and I was like, no, I don't think that sounds like my type of book. And then I heard Jane from It's Jane Lizzie talking about it, and the way she talked about the main character, Jude, just sold me on this character, sold me on this story and this world. This is about June Duarte. Her mother's first husband, who happened to be a fairy lord, came back to collect his daughter from that marriage and discovered that his wife was living with a human man and had 2 children with him. So he killed both of them and then took the children into Elfheim to raise as his own. And so Jude and her sister Taryn have grown up being treated like they are fairy gentry, even though they are humans, and humans are not. They're just not thought of very well. And so she comes into, they're bullied a lot by the other fairy children. And a lot of it has to do with weakness is just a big no-no in any fairy court that you have ever read about. If you are seen as weak, you are going down. That's usually how it goes in fairy. But this was such a fun book for me to read because it's enemies to lovers, and I didn't realize how much I loved enemies to lovers until I read this book. If it had been written in any other way, I would have been like, nope, don't want to touch it with a 10-foot pole, but somehow Holly Black managed to write this particular situation in exactly the way that I'm like, okay, I'm okay with this. I love the interplay of the humans in the fairy world and how she kind of has Jude as this character who is already like good at what she does. She's already badass. She doesn't have to learn how to survive in fairy. She already knows. She's already been doing it. So most of her storyline is just her trying to get into a position where she is completely protected from anything that the fae can do to her. She doesn't want to be seen as weak. She doesn't want to be seen as just a normal human. She wants to be someone who is untouchable and powerful. And I loved this story. It was so good. The next one I want to talk to you about is actually an adult book, and that is the 5th season by N.K. Jemisin. This is about Essen, and she lives in a world where their lives kind of center around these different seasons. There are 5 of them. The first 4 are your normal seasons, but then every now and then they will have what's called a 5th season, and a 5th season means just destruction all around. They've got this thing called the Stone Lore that they've been using for generation after generation, and it's basically a handbook on how to survive whenever this 5th season comes around. They're also living in a world that is plagued by earthquakes. They are continually having to deal with quakes and having to quell them, and they have specific people who are able to do that. They have the power to do that. Unfortunately, instead of like treating these people who are able to control the earthquakes and to lessen the extent of the damage, instead of treating them well, they basically have enslaved them. They have the semblance of freedom, but they don't really have any choice in what they do. Once one is found, they are taken to the academy or some sort of place where they are trained, and that is where they live their lives. Essen is a character in this world, and they've just entered a 5th season, and as they enter this 5th season, she comes home to find that her son has been killed by her husband, and her husband is taken off with her daughter. There's so much mayhem and just chaos going on because of this 5th season that has just started, and she's trying to make her way through all of that and find her daughter. I thought this was a brilliant book. Not only does it play around with tense, you have 2 points of view that are in 3rd person, but then you have 1 point of view that is in 2nd person, and it is done so well in the way that the narrator is talking to you. I didn't even notice we were in 2nd person until I was like 50 pages in, and I was like, oh yeah, this is 2nd person. Like, I was that caught up in the story and in the world. You're gonna be a little, like, she just kind of throws you in there and doesn't explain a lot, but you will glean in the first like 50 pages or so, you'll glean what's going on and kind of start to figure things out. It was a really accessible fantasy novel. It was one of those that like you're not having to sit there and reread the page 4 or 5 times to figure out what the heck just happened and what is going on and what's going on with this. Like, I'm not entirely sure whether it's science or magic that makes the people able to do what they're able to do. It's like they have an organ in their head that allows them to do this, but I don't know how that got there. Is it magic? Was it planted there by science? I'm not entirely sure. I'm thinking of maybe it was planted by science because they say it's science fiction, but let me tell you, this dystopian reads like high fantasy. It's like your typical high fantasy quest novel. It was just a wild ride from start to finish, and I had so much fun. We get so many interesting characters in this book. You start with this very straightforward plot, but then you're getting these 2 other storylines, and you're sitting there going, how do these all intersect and come together? And when they do, I was impressed by how well she brought everything together. I cannot wait to read the 2nd book. The next book I want to tell you guys about is Lazaretto by Diane McKinney Whetstone. Now, this is not one that necessarily was recommended to me on BookTube, but I did pick it up because I was doing Blackathon in February, and oh my gosh, this book. This is another multi-point of view story that just comes together in the most satisfying way. It's a multi-generational story that follows several different Black families living in the north of the United States right after President Lincoln gets assassinated. It basically follows the story of these 2 boys that grew up as brothers in an orphanage. It follows them throughout their life and shows you kind of the different people and families that they were a part of and that influenced who they were, and it is such an emotional story. You are going to, like, it's going to pull at your heart in so many different ways. The next book I want to talk about is The Sun Is Also a Star by Nicola Yoon. Natasha is a Jamaican girl whose family is about to be deported because they came into the country illegally. Daniel is a young Korean boy who's getting ready to interview to get into an Ivy League school. They end up meeting by chance on the day that Natasha's family is about to be deported while she's trying to kind of fight this deportation, trying to figure out, do her best to stay in this country because this is where her life is, this is where she's grown up. She doesn't really know any other home. So they meet. He bets her that he could get her to fall in love with him in just one day, and she takes that bet because she doesn't actually believe in love. And it just, you know, the rest is history. So this takes place over 24 hours, actually less than 24 hours if you think about it. It's like 12 or 18 hours, something like that. And it just was such a wonderful and wholesome book. One of my favorite things about this is that it is primarily from Daniel and Natasha's point of view, but occasionally we will get just random points of view of people who are observing them from the outside. They don't know necessarily the effect that they are having on the people that they are coming into contact with, but we as the audience are getting to see it, and I found that so fascinating. I loved it. This is very insta-lovey in some cases, and I know a lot of people don't like that, but the way that it unfolds is so beautiful and natural, and it's just... the ending almost had me crying. It was such a good ending. Like, I know some people think maybe it's a little bit abrupt, but like, come on guys, we knew what was going. You know what's happening next. Like, you know. The next book I'm going to talk about is a short story collection, and that is Black Enough by Ibby Boy. I thought this was so good. It's 17 different stories by different Black authors, just about Black kids living in America, doing their regular everyday thing, dealing with school and dealing with romance and dealing with their parents and everything that comes with being a teen in general. I don't think there was a single weak story in the entire bunch. There were a couple that I was like, I would have liked just a little more of that story. You're really gonna end it there? Really? But overall, like, they were all so good. They were all so well put together. Just little slices of each of these kids' lives. You got a really good feel for their character. You got a really good feel for the world that they lived in and what they were dealing with on an everyday basis. So each of them has like a thing that they're trying to figure out, and so you get to see them figure that out, and then you're left satisfied. You're left happy. The next book I want to talk to you guys about is The Proposal by Jasmine Guillory. So this is the second book, and I don't know the name of the series, but the first book is The Wedding Date, and I read that because of BookTube, and because I read that, I had to pick this up when it came out. I liked The Wedding Date. I loved this one. This is about Nick and Carlos, and Nick gets proposed to on the Jumbotron at a baseball game by her boyfriend, who has only been dating her 5 months. He doesn't even spell her name right, guys. Doesn't even spell her name right. She obviously turns him down because they haven't even remotely like talked about marriage or moving in or said I love you. And unfortunately, because she lives in LA, there are a whole bunch of just drama-hungry camera people around that start trying to film her. And so Carlos comes in and gives her a plausible excuse to get the heck out of there. And that starts this great, like, whirlwind romance. I read this at Universal Studios Orlando. I'm a terrible person, I know, but it was just so good. I did not want to put it down. The minute I finished it, I went and I texted my friends, like, you need to read this book because it's so good. I thought it was so sweet, and there are so many good conversations that are had in this book. It's also so funny. Jasmine Guillory's sense of humor is absolutely brilliant. I thought, like, she had me in stitches for almost this entire book. Yes, it's a little cheesy, but, like, life is cheesy sometimes, especially when people are in love. The next book I want to talk about that I read because of BookTube is Illuminae by Jay Kristoff and Amy Kaufman. This is about Katie and Ezra, and they live on this illegal mining colony. And because it is an illegal mining company, their company's rival, Baytech, decides they're going to bomb the heck out of it because of why not? It's not like they can do anything if we decide to take over this illegal mining company. Katie and Ezra survive, but they have to evacuate the planet. They end up on 2 different ships, and then all hell breaks loose. Like, it just goes poorly for everyone in general. This book is done in a mixed media format. It's this really accessible sci-fi where just the world and the story are so well integrated. Like, you're not sitting there going through 4 different pages about how a blaster works. We don't need that. We just need to know that it pew pew. You're experiencing the differences in technology in a very organic and natural way. It also, it's a mixed media format, which is like just transcriptions of different videos and interviews and different reports that are cobbled together. And I wasn't sure I was gonna like this, but despite the fact that some of the documents are just like chat room conversations and interviews and stuff that doesn't really give you a lot of description about what's going on in the room around them, you still get so much character from that. You still come out of this feeling like you know these characters so well. And I really loved how well they were able to communicate this story using alternative methods of storytelling, using methods that aren't necessarily like, you don't see a lot in a hard, like, bound up in a book. I feel like that's becoming more popular now, but I really, really liked how they put everything together. 2 more, guys, and then we're done. The next book I want to talk to you guys about is Renegades by Marissa Meyer. This book, oh man. If you've been on my channel for a while, you know I have a thing for superheroes. Like, I just love them. especially if they were made by DC. It is about Nova and Adrian, and they are two teens on separate sides of kind of a superhero, supervillain war. Now, the war technically has been over for the last 10 or so years, since Nova was like 6. There are these people called the Renegades. They are the superheroes of the day. Adrian is the son of the two most prominent renegades, the ones that kind of run their city. Nova is the niece of the most infamous anarchist to have ever existed. He was killed 10 years ago when the Renegades finally beat the anarchists. She and some of the people that were part of that anarchist team have been kind of just sitting in the background, waiting for their time to come and take out the Renegades and cause chaos again. An opportunity comes up for Nova to join the Renegades, so she infiltrates the Renegades to further this plan to take control of Gatlin back from the Renegades. Guys, this is so well done. There are so many different comic book Easter eggs in this series. If you are like a fan of any type of like Marvel or DC comics, you're going to be reading this and you're like, oh yeah, you're going to be thinking of different superheroes that would match with some of these powers. Some of them are kind of mashups, like we have Batman, but he has a sense of humor, so Nightwing. And then we obviously have like the Captain America / Superman character, and it's just so much fun to read. It has this great like slow burn romance that I absolutely adore, and the characters, oh my gosh, all the characters, they have such interesting and unique powers. I just had so much fun reading this book, and I never would have picked it up if I had not heard of it on BookTube. The final book I want to talk to you guys about is My Lady Jane by Cynthia Hand, Brody Ashton, and Jody Meadows. This is about Jane Grey, and if you know your Tudor history, you would know that she was only queen for 9 days before she got beheaded by her cousin, Mary Tudor. It was a really bad, just a bad time all around for poor Jane Grey and anyone who was connected to her, because just Tudor politics were wild and everyone wanted the throne and nobody thought anybody should have, like, everyone had an opinion on who should be on the throne. So many people just died trying to get someone else on the throne or trying to support someone who was on the throne, and it was just a disaster. This is a retelling of Jane Grey's story in a world where there is magic. It's reimagined the whole Catholic versus Protestant thing that was going on in Tudor England at the time, but this time it's normal humans against people who can turn into animals. Some of them can control when they turn into an animal, some of them cannot. One of the main characters cannot. He is a boy who can turn into a horse, and it just is inconvenient for him at times. To no one's surprise, Mary Tudor is very against this idea of people being able to turn into animals. They think it is unnatural and against God. This retells history in a thoroughly irreverent way, and I thought it was fantastic. Like, I wasn't sure I was going to be okay with it because Tudor history is one of the few, like I know a good bit about Tudor history because it's a little bit of one of my obsessions. But also it was talking about Tudor history, so I was like, oh, I'll read this. I'll see if I like it. I didn't think I was going to because I know how Jane Grey's story ends, but I ended up liking it. I thought it ended up being done so well. But it's just so funny and humorous, and sometimes the narrator will talk to the audience to like comment on things that were normal back then, and they'll be like, so this was normal back then, we now know that this is stupid. I just enjoyed it so much. I laughed so hard reading this book. So that is it for this video. Please let me know down in the comments what books you've read because of BookTube. I would love to hear about some of those. Thank you so much for watching. If you enjoyed this video, please give it a thumbs up. Also, hit that subscribe button. I make videos 2 to 3 times a week about books and writing, and I would love to see your lovely face here on a regular basis. If you want more of me, you can find me on Instagram and Twitter. Those are both @thewordnerd, with a 3 in nerd instead of the E. That is it for now, my friends. I will see you later when we will talk about more wordy, nerdy things. Bye!